caught up with Austin Wintory here over at the show floor of GDC to ask him a few. First of all, you've held a session here at GDC. What was that all about?
My talk was yesterday, and it's called "Music is Storytelling," and it was about using music as a storytelling device in your games in a deeper way than we usually do by building character arcs and things like that into the actual sort of DNA of the music. And if that makes any sense.
It sounds really abstract and crazy, but what it's really about is it about introducing music as sort of a part of the game design more than sort of having it on top of things.
Right. It's not some ancillary feature, but it's actually a core part of the story that you're telling. Which doesn't mean it has to be a music-driven game. Like Monaco is not a music-driven game, for example. Journey kind of is, because there's no dialogue or anything. But either way, if the music functions as a storytelling device in the same way that, color can be used or level design, levels get harder as you go throughout the game, that's a form of storytelling because it's not the same over and over and over. And so there's an arc that you experience. The music should do the same, so that's what I was talking about.
Right, and music. First of all, how did you get involved with these two games, and sort of when did you get involved, and when is the music made?
In the case of Monaco, I was brought in maybe 7-8 months ago, and I'm still working on it. So it's kind of funny to give a talk about a game that I'm going to be working on again on Saturday, but such is the way. And the game had already been in development, though, for like a year or two. So I was brought in after there was a pretty good idea of what the game was supposed to be like. In heavy contrast to that, Journey, I was hired from day one when it didn't exist, even as a basic prototype. So I was able to write music and really influence the game design and be an active part of the team from the very, very earliest stage. And I ended up writing music for Journey for 3 years, which was awesome. I mean, I loved working with Genova Chen and Kelly Santiago, Robin Haneke, that game company. They're just awesome people to work with.
You worked with them before as well?
Yeah, I worked on their first major PlayStation 3 game called Flow. And I also actually worked with Genova. We met in school, and so I did his master's thesis, which was Flow kind of 1.0, and then redone to much more spectacular effect, I think, on PS3.
I think I saw a speech on that a few GDCs back when he talked about that journey with Flow, and he's got a lot of interesting ideas on game design that's very different from anything else.
Genova is one of these guys, like you remember in The Matrix, when there's the guy that sees the code, he sees beyond the code, so he just looks at it and he's like, that's a blonde woman, that's about it. That's sort of how Genova is. The technical aspect of game design is, I think, in many ways so simple to him that he immediately goes into kind of a spiritual place that lies beyond that. And he's like, how can we use things like code and, audio assets and all these very technical ideas to actually move people and make an almost spiritual connection with them? And that was Flow, and then Flower did it even better, and then Journey, I think, does it even better. And hopefully whatever is next is even better.
So what's your, that you mentioned Genova's creative process there. What's your creative process like, and sort of how do you sort of work with the music or on a day-to-day basis?
It's a very reiterative process, especially on a game like Journey. My favorite thing is to always assume that whatever I wrote is probably crap and figure out a way to get rid of it and replace it with something better. And so, you're constantly whittling away and peeling off layers and taking apart, putting it back together in hopes that you get something, good and interesting. And the only way to do that is to have something, stand the test of time. And so if a piece can survive this brutal process, then it's maybe okay music, So my creative process involves a lot of just constant reevaluation, and especially in this game, we would put it in and then they play test the game. And then ask people, what was the most memorable part of the game? And it would help us identify, where maybe the music could be a little bit more interesting here, or maybe it's calling too much attention to itself here, and that kind of thing. So just, in other words, it's just elbow grease. The process is all about elbow grease.
So that actually sounds a little bit like many artists or composers would say, like, this is my piece, I'm writing it, I'm not letting anyone else influence me, but it doesn't sound like...
No, that's not. I mean, ultimately, I'm going to say what I believe in, and I'm going to say what I think is uniquely me. But I'm not writing music alone as the sole audience member. I write music to reach people, and so I have to test it out. If it doesn't reach someone, then I've spent a whole lot of time alone ignoring my family and friends for no particularly helpful reason. So absolutely, I don't invite co-composers in the form of testers or whatever, but I absolutely rely on their reactions to see if it's working. So yeah, absolutely, it's not a closed door process in that way at all.
So working on games like Journey and Monaco seems like very intimate processes. So would you consider working on things that would be in a much sort of grander scale, where there's much more people involved and bigger companies and that sort of thing, or does that not interest you?
Oh, I mean, I love it all. I mean, Journey is very middle of the road. I mean, that game company is a small development studio of about a little over a dozen people. So as far as game companies compared to Naughty Dog or even a company like Double Fine, that's still pretty small team. But at the same time, it was a PlayStation game, so we have the full Sony team as well, music team, the game producers, the external development team. So there's a lot of people involved. Now, of course, if you're doing Halo or you're doing Call of Duty, there's going to be even more people. And then if you do Monaco, it's just me and Andy. And I've also done a lot of films, and in movies, it's very often a kind of committee. But to me, at the end of the day, that's not one is not better than the other. It's different creative processes, and there are different ways of achieving success, like a successful collaboration in each different kind of circumstance. So, no, I really love it all. In fact, the thing I love most is the diversity. So I wouldn't want to do everything like Monaco, and I wouldn't want to do everything with 1,000 people either.
So are there any great video game composers that have inspired you, or that you feel are sort of really great? And
of course, absolutely. Peter McConnell, who scored all the original LucasArts adventure games. Grim Fandango, to me, being the sort of apex, both as a game and as music, I just love those. I love all those, but Grim Fandango especially. That was one of those scores that I heard at an important time in my life, and made me, this is the world I need to be a part of, that someone could create something like this. And then in recent years, BioShock was for me another score that I thought was a monumental leap forward for mainly psychological reasons, in the way that music influenced the gameplay. It wasn't just that it was wonderful music, though it was, but it was an unexpected choice, and I really loved that. And I've become good friends with the composer of that, Gary Scheinman. I think he's fantastic. And then just recently, Dear Esther, Jessica Curry, who's a British composer, and flew to GDC, and I got to meet her yesterday, and we'd been tweeting to each other back and forth, and I was telling her how much I loved her music. And again, she's doing something that I don't hear a lot of in games, and which I hold in great regard, music which is featuring brilliant performers and isn't all about the big impact, the way a lot of game scores are, and the way it's right for those games. Like you play Call of Duty, solo piano is probably not right. But in Dear Esther, solo piano and like 2 or 3 strings played beautifully, that's really, really right. And she did an amazing job. So yeah, there's just a few among many, many others.
I think for me, when I hear a really great video game score and I'm playing it at the same time, it really doesn't feel like I'm hearing great music. It's just one great experience, and it comes together. Would you say that because I understand you intellectualize scores a little bit more than what I would do as a normal player, but is that something you strive for?
It's always an interesting debate. In using movies as an analogy, they say the best score is the one that you're whistling on the drive home, like Indiana Jones or Star Wars. They also say, the other people say, the best score is the one that you don't ever remember hearing any music at all, because you're so into that experience and it's immersive. And you could say the same of games. Flow, I think, is an example of music that doesn't really try to grab you and be catchy. I mean, it really overtly avoids that in a way, so that the game itself is just one very amorphous musical experience. Journey, I'll be interested to see. I don't actually know which one it falls in. I honestly don't know. It'll be really interesting to see what people take away from it. But I know games historically. You think of like Mario Brothers, Zelda. These are things that people whistle when they stop playing the game, and that's part of what people look back on and say was great about that game. And in recent years, Civilization 4 with this song called Babietu is another example of that. It's another composer, very good friend of mine, and a wonderful composer, Christopher Tin, who wrote that and did a great favor to composers everywhere by being the first person to ever win a Grammy for something written for a video game. So that helped all of us. So, it's something that you sort of think about while you're writing the music, but at the same time, your goal needs to be what's right for this game. And if it's right and you whistle it when you shut the game off, then I guess that's good. Or if someone says, I loved that game, and they don't ever even think to mention the music, you've also sort of succeeded in that way too. So who knows?
As long as they don't turn it off, right?
Yeah. Well, that's video game symptom number one, is where's the fader on the music? Day one, Fortunately, in Journey, I don't think we'll have that problem, we've designed it very conscientiously to not be that way. Hopefully, we'll see. It comes out next week, so we talk next Friday. And,
I've seen a few scores, and it's looking pretty good by the reviewer.
Yeah, no, it's true. I feel incredibly grateful. It's actually surreal. The reviews have been so good that I almost feel like, are they talking about the same game? Do I? Because I'm very proud of it. I'm not meaning to be self-deprecating, but man, those reviews have been crazy. I mean, there's like well over 50 publications that have given it 9.5 or perfect, and then like another 40 that gave it 9. I mean, it's like, I've had well-reviewed things before, but this is off the charts, and it's been, like I said, it's surreal. It's like, did I even work on that? Because I don't. Am I even capable of something that people would react that way to? I wouldn't have thought so. And so when they do, it immediately puts me in this sort of like dream space where it just doesn't feel real. So, but the real test is when the people can get it, which is next week, and that
could knock you back to reality.
I know. I look forward to being humbled, because the thing is, there's no way that 100% of the people that buy it will love it to that degree. Hopefully, most will.
And that's also the price of success. When you're way too successful, then there's always going to be people who love to knock you down just because you are successful.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's fine. They have that right. I would not try to limit that. That said, I actually am really excited to see from the people that don't like it why they don't like it. Because I feel like we made the game that we wanted to make in every way. I feel like, I'm not saying it's perfect, I'm not saying it's the best game ever, but I'm saying we set out to make the game that is going to be the one that ships. So for the people that don't like it, they are definitely authentically reacting to something that we made, as opposed to, oh, well, there was a bug in that feature, and so of course you're not going to like it, or we didn't get to do this or that. There's not any reason. We don't have any excuses. So I'm really actually excited to see what they don't like, because it'll end up being one of those like, well, that's just your taste, and I respect that. And it's well within your right. But I'm just dying with curiosity to see, what they say.
Thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.